Now, Living in Sin by Adrienne Rich. Rich wrote this when she was 26, and it is based on an unmarried couple living together. And at the time when she wrote this, it's based in the 1950s, when she wrote it, unmarried couples who lived together was highly disapproved of at the time. And it's different from her other poems in that the format is free verse as opposed to her stanzas and her structure and her rhyme and rhythm in some of the other poems. And in this poem we see an intimate connection between the poet and the reader being established. And as well as that, what the poem does is it contrasts the romantic expectations with the reality of everyday life. So it's basically a young girl moving in with her boyfriend, and she expected it to be a wonderful, beautiful, happy time, but instead she's faced with mundane tasks like the cleaning and things like that. And the poem describes an unmarried couple live together, as I said, in an American city in the 50s, and the couple live in a little studio flat which combines fairly basic living quarters and the artist's workspace. So she's going out with a composer, and it seems that her partner, who's some kind of musician, has persuaded her to move in with him. Prior to moving in with her boyfriend, the woman had somewhat idealised what it would be like to live with him, but the reality has proved to be very disappointing for her. So I'll read through it and we'll go through it bit by bit. Living in Sin by Adrienne Rich. She had thought the studio would keep itself, no dust upon the furniture of love. Half heresy to wish the taps less vocal, the panes relieved of grime. A plate of pears, a piano with a Persian shawl, a cat stalking the picturesque amusing mouse has risen at his urging. Not that at 5 each separate stair would writhe under the milkman's tramp. That morning light so coldly would delineate the scraps of last night's cheese and 3 sepulchral bottles. That on the kitchen shelf among the saucers a pair of beetle eyes would fix her own, envoy from some village in the mouldings. Meanwhile he, with a yawn, sounded a dozen notes upon the keyboard, declared it out of tune, shrugged at the mirror, rubbed his beard, went out for cigarettes, while she, jeered by the minor demons, pulled back the sheets and made the bed, and found a towel to dust the tabletop, and let the coffee pot boil over on the stove. By evening she was back in love again, though not so wholly, but throughout the night she woke sometimes to feel the daylight coming like a relentless milkman up the stairs. I'm going to read through it again and go through the story of it. She had thought the studio would keep itself. So she thought that she never really thought about how to mind the house before she moved in with him. She thought it would just keep itself clean. An idealised view of life with her boyfriend. No dust upon the furniture of love. She never imagined there'd be dust there. She only saw her love for him. She never thought that it could be grimy or dirty. Half heresy to wish the taps less vocal, the panes relieved of grime. So she wanted the noisy taps to stop making that noise, and for the panes, the window panes, to be relieved of grime. She imagined a plate of pears, a piano with a Persian shawl, a cat stalking the picturesque amusing mouse had risen at his urging. Not that at 5 each separate stair would writhe under the milkman's tramp. So we have more noise again. So what we see here is a noisy, dirty apartment. That morning light so coldly would delineate the scraps of last night's cheese and 3 sepulchral bottles. That on the kitchen shelf among the saucers a pair of beetle eyes would fix her own, envoy from some village in the mouldings. So what they have here is an infestation of beetles somewhere in the mouldings, and the beetles come out onto the kitchen worktops. Meanwhile he, with a yawn, sounded a dozen notes upon the keyboard, declared it out of tune, so the he here is her partner. And the poem changes. I put a wee mark in there. Poem changes there. Meanwhile he, with a yawn, sounded a dozen notes upon the keyboard, declared it out of tune, shrugged at the mirror, rubbed his beard, went out for cigarettes, while she, jeered by the minor demons, pulled back the sheets and made the bed, and found a towel to dust the tabletop, and let the coffee pot boil over on the stove. By evening she was back in love again, though not so wholly, but throughout the night she woke sometimes to feel the daylight coming like a relentless milkman up the stairs. So I'm going to split the poem in half here, lines of 1 to 14 and line 15 to 22. And I'll go through the first half of the poem now. So when persuading her to join him in the studio, the musician, her boyfriend, had described what living together would be like. An ideal image of their life together had risen at his urging. And he persuaded her. It had risen at his urging in the woman's mind. And as an artist, her boyfriend didn't make much money, but he claimed, however, that they would be poor but happy, living a free and easy lifestyle among the city's artistic community. She imagined when she moved into him an attractive and comfortable apartment, featuring a plate of pears, a piano with the Persian shawl, a cat stuck in a picturesque amusing mouse. So her dream. You could even say her unrealistic dream. That's what she wanted. When the woman imagined living with her partner, she never thought of housework or dusting or cleaning or any of the other boring activities. Somewhat naively, she imagined that their apartment would keep itself. I'll write in there, naive. She thought that it would always be clean and tidy. Their life together would be idyllic, filled with love and romance, not mundane things such as scrubbing and dusting. She said no dust upon the furniture of love. And it's so often the case, however, the reality of the situation is very different to what the speaker had imagined. The studio, it turns out, isn't the least bit clean, or comfortable or attractive. It seems downright filthy. The windows are covered with a thick layer of dirt, and the woman finds herself wishing the window panes could somehow be relieved of grime. There's scraps of food and empty bottles lying around the place. She saw the light would come in and it would delineate, it would outline the scraps of last night's cheese and 3 sepulchral bottles there, sepulchral like tombs. Worst of all, the apartment seems to be infested with beetles, which have their nest among the apartment's mouldings or their skirting boards, and every so often one of the creatures wanders out onto the kitchen shelf. And she uses a really good metaphor there to describe the beetle infestation. She compares the insect's nest to a village. So we'll stick metaphor in there. And she says one of the beetles, the lonely one, is an envoy or a messenger from his beetle community. An envoy is a messenger. And she says that it's noisy as well. It's not nice. The taps leak noisily. They're vocal. And the stairs outside squeak annoyingly each morning when the milkman arrives. At 5, each separate stair would rise under the milkman's tramp. And despite these issues, though, the woman feels that it'd be somehow wrong to complain about life in the apartment. She accepts it and she appreciates it, kind of. She says that it would be sinful or crazy to wish things were different. She says up here, half heresy. Actually highlight that. A heresy is something that's unholy, unorthodox. So she says it would be half heresy to kind of give out about it. Because she has the existence she kind of wanted. He asked her to move in with her. She dreamed of it. She wanted it, and she said yeah. So she can't really give out. In the second half of the poem, now when we meet her boyfriend, we get a sense of what life is like in the studio apartment. The woman ends up doing most of the housework. She pulled back the sheets and made the bed and found a towel to dust the tabletop. The man she lives with seems to do very little to help out around the apartment, and he's kind of presented as being lazy and uncaring and kind of self-absorbed. He seems to just drift around the apartment, yawning and looking at himself in the mirror before heading out for a packet of cigarettes. The young man in the poem doesn't have a job, so he can devote his life to music, but he seems to spend little time actually playing his music. Instead, he plays a dozen notes on the piano before declaring that it's out of tune and he can't do any artistic work. We get a sense from this that it may be just an excuse and that he avoids doing it all the time. Just the way that she lists things, He, with a yawn, sounded a dozen notes upon the keyboard, declared it out of tune, shrugged at the mirror, rubbed at his beard, went out for cigarettes. The way that this is listed suggests that it happens a lot, like she knows the routine very well. This is normal for her, and normal for him as well. And instead of getting on with his creative work, the young man just wanders out for cigarettes. We get the impression that he could easily spend the day wandering in and out of bars or things like that, or coffee shops and chatting with his artistic friends, but he doesn't spend his time productively at all. And it's little wonder then the woman is miserable and disappointed. The reality of life in the studio apartment hasn't lived up to her expectations, and her boyfriend seems to be feckless and uncaring. Rich describes her depression as minor demons. Jeered by the minor demons. She's been picked on by them. It's a depression. They torment her, they jeer at the miserable state in which she's landed herself. And though the woman is clearly unhappy with her life, she seems unable to change it. She's too in love to leave behind the filthy apartment and her uncaring boyfriend. She says, by evening, I was back in love again. Sleep gives her some release from the depression that haunts her, but there are moments throughout the night when she wakes and realises that another day of misery is only around the corner. She woke sometimes to feel the daylight coming, like a relentless milkman up the stairs. So we have another good metaphor here, where she is likening the approach to morning and likening kind of her depression and how bad the day is going to be. She likens it to a relentless milkman up the stairs, and he's relentless, he never goes away, meaning that this feeling that she has never goes away. So we have a few very obvious poetic techniques there. I mentioned two metaphors. We have enjambment throughout the entire poem, conversational kind of format, but not conversational language. Her language is a bit more formal. So she's enjambment throughout, and it is free verse. What else do we see? We see a lot of alliteration, plate of pears, a piano with a Persian shawl, picturesque, amusing mouse. And our main themes, put at the side, themes, reality and fantasy would be the most obvious one, in my opinion. So one of the themes is reality and fantasy, and we see a sharp contrast between fantasy and reality here. The woman imagined her life in the studio would be perfect, an exciting life lived with a sensitive young artist in a beautiful apartment, and as we've seen, however, the reality has turned out to be very disappointing for her. The apartment is a dump, and her partner deserves to be dumped. The poem emphasises just how often reality can betray our deepest hopes and expectations. Another theme that we see as well, and one that is really common in all of her work, is the inequality between the sexes. The poem highlights the inequality that often still persists between the sexes. It is the woman, unsurprisingly, who attempts to keep the apartment in some kind of decent condition, while the man spends his time playing the piano and wandering the streets in search of cigarettes. The poem highlights how even supposedly sensitive and enlightened men, such as the woman's artistic boyfriend, can reinforce this traditional inequality, and demonstrates rather how even today women can be victims in a man's world. The inequality that dominates the relationship is the real sin with which the young couple are living. So, living in sin. Not only is it her making a comment about the time that living together pre-marriage was bad, but also the sin there is bad between the sexes. It's very messy, sorry. And the last theme that I'll talk about is depression and despair. which is common in most of her poems that we're studying as well. Like many of her poems, Living in Sin touches on the area of depression and loneliness. The woman in the poem is depicted as suffering from the minor demons of loneliness. Did we highlight that? Yeah, we did. She's suffering from the minor demons of loneliness and depression. In other poems by Rich, however, we learn how rapidly these minor demons can become the greater problems of all-out despair and suicidal tendencies. So that's it for Living in Sin. Pretty straightforward one, I think.